Welcome to Devalued with Mike and Caroline, the place where we talk about art and money and how creative people are navigating the ever-changing landscape of trying to make a living for their work.
We're going to be interviewing all types of creative people, and we'll be talking about all types of issues that creative people face. We hope you'll get something out of it. We're excited to welcome you to Devalued. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Caroline.
Who are we talking with?
We are talking to the luminous Robyn Hitchcock and Emma Swift, two of my favorite songwriters, and they're also owners of their very own boutique record label, Tiny Ghost.
I learned a lot about what they do in the label, like how you can be your own independent entity.
Yeah, I mean, Robyn has a long career as a solo artist and, also in bands with the Sop Boys and the Egyptians. And Emma has her own career as a songwriter. And, they've both been on labels. And now that they've started their own, they're doing everything. So everything is in-house. Everything from, pressing the vinyl to shipping it out to making their own merch. And, now they're business owners as well as artists. And we talked a lot about how you juggle that aspect of life and, what the upsides and downsides are of going independent and taking things in-house. And it was a really funny conversation because Robyn Hitchcock is one of the funniest people on the planet, probably.
I am so charmed by them both. So I loved this conversation.
So, and Emma Swift has an album coming out. And it's going to be a nervous breakdown with strings. That's how she describes it. So we're super looking forward to that. And we're very excited for you guys to hear this conversation.
Let's get into it. All right. We'll start where we usually start, which is, do you feel like art and money have a natural relationship?
Not at all. But I think that if you do want to make a life out of being an artist, there comes a point where their intersection becomes completely necessary. Or at least for me, from my background, I'm from a working family. I'm not a trust fund kid. And if I want to pour all my time and energy into art, then, yeah, there has to come a point where I have to make it financially viable for me.
Yeah, completely. I mean, whatever you might think about it, art and money are absolutely joined at the hip, And either that or you have to have patrons. So something has to fund you,
I miss those times. It seems like a very romantic time where someone with a great skill would just get to live on the property of some...
Like Yeats and Lady Gregory or something like that.
Yeah, but you then still had to do what the patron wanted. There'd be certain lines you had to toe. Under communism or whatever, art had to reflect the ideology of the country, and under capitalism, art has to find some way of paying for itself, or some benign hand reaches down from the cloud and hands you a fistful of dollars.
That's the dream. That's the real American dream.
So when you started Tiny Ghost a couple of years ago, how long ago did you start that label?
The label started, I think, in around 2015, and I didn't really think about it very much as being anything more than a hobby. It was to put out a 7-inch that Robyn and I had made ourselves, and anybody who's ever made a 7-inch vinyl before knows how deeply unprofitable they are as a business exercise. But they're a fun way to learn how to put out records. And they're a fun way to gauge the interest of your fans and see if they like buying records, because they're really a truly novelty item. 7 inches and cassettes, they're both a bit of a pain, but they're beautiful, decadent objects that for nostalgists like us, like I'm a kid of the 80s, Robyn's a kid of the 60s, they have meaning. And so I started Tiny Ghost with one 7-inch and didn't think much of it. I'm a very slow-moving person. I am the tortoise in the relationship, and Robyn is the hare. And so I started the label and then didn't think much of it. And then when the pandemic came around and, you know, talking about the intersection of like art and commerce, like many indie musicians, so much of our work and income prior to the pandemic had been, it was touring. It was Robyn touring a lot and me selling merch at a desk and singing harmony vocals. And then when touring stopped, I had to figure out a way to keep us going. And that's when the label really took off. So it's sort of, it is a bit like a kid. You know, it started with a 7-inch and then by 2020 when it was 5, it really sort of, it was like it was going to school.
Right. That's awesome. So was that the Love is a Drag 7-inch?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. I got that at a show back when you guys first put that out. But was that the first time that either of you had sold music directly to your audience?
More or less. I'd done a couple of things from my website around the turn of the century, but very, very kind of on an amateur basis. This was the first time that I'd been involved in vinyl being pressed. And yeah, I mean, like Em said, it started off pretty gradually, which I think it had to do. I don't think we could have gone in full scale and gone, right, now we're going to put out hundreds of LPs plus loads of merchandise and we're going to start now.
Sign all our favorite bands.
But, you know, it's something that you do have to build your way up to. And it's true, you know, Em is more gradual, but probably has more sustain, and I have more kind of impulse ideas and things. But
we're very yin and yang,
you know,
in that sense. It was the first thing I had ever put out myself. But I, being a very deeply non-prolific person, I'd only put out a couple of other things before.
And what did that teach you about the possibilities of it?
It was really exciting. You know, I think there's something to be said for when you're doing it DIY and you see orders coming in and you get that direct contact and feedback with the audience. It's a very lovely relationship. And now that I do that and am more familiar with doing that on a regular basis, I think it would be very hard to walk away from that relationship. Not that I see myself as a particularly enticing artist for a cool indie label or anything like that. But if someone was to come along and say, hey, sign with our label, losing that connection with the fans that I currently have is something I would really have to think long and hard about.
Do you enjoy the process of, well, there are a lot of things that a label does, everything from deciding what the packaging will be to then figuring out who's going to make those things and then how you're going to sell them and how you're going to deliver them. There are a lot of decisions that have to get made as a label that maybe when you're just the artist, you're not really thinking about all those steps as deeply. So when you get your hands into all that other stuff, maybe you feel even more attached to the finished product than you did before.
Sometimes it's really fun and sometimes it's really overwhelming and a terrible pain. I mean, anybody who's in the record pressing business will remember how hard it was to press vinyl a couple of years ago, and that was just deeply frustrating to try and run a business where you didn't know when you were going to get the product and the wait times were so long and you can generally only run a pre-order campaign for 3 months, but you still have to cover the costs of the vinyl order. You know, it's expensive stuff. It's not easy. You tend to need quicker turnaround times so that you can get the orders in and then pay for the order and then roll it out. So yeah, it can be frustrating, but it's also like packaging is a delight. I'm really bad at graphic design, but I'm also quite good at knowing that I'm bad at it and then just hiring someone else. Like I know that there are some artists who are so DIY that they will, you know, fuss over the layout of their records and their cassettes and their CDs, and I hand those tasks out to people like Johnny Whitman, who's in Seattle and fantastic, and Jeremy Fetzer locally.
We love Jeremy. I love his work.
He's so good.
Well, like both the it's interesting because like the Tiny Ghost aesthetic, if you will, is very collagey with the blonde on the tracks, and then Shufflemania. Both those album covers are very kind of similar in a way. They're collagey, photograph based. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Those ones are, yeah, it's true. But I mean, when Em says she's bad at graphic design, you don't actually do graphic design. You're just very good at assessing it. You just don't dabble in the actual art yourself, but you've got a very keen eye as to what works and what doesn't, and you're very good at your choices in terms of people like Jeremy and Johnny Whitman have paid off. They're great. So, that you're sort of not exactly quality control, but I know, and we had experience with stuff this year, there were things we got pressed up. I got pressed up while Em was off duty for a bit, and then we had to scrap them because they weren't good enough.
That hurts.
It does, and it's still hurting. But I mean, Em is extremely good at that stuff. I feel very safe in her audio visual hands. I know that the Tiny Ghost, whatever comes out on Tiny Ghost, is going to be of hers or mine, is going to be scrutinized both visually and orally, in terms of listening.
Yeah.
To its maximum boutique niche quality. So what Em oversees is a kind of an extremely quality product. It's a tiny label. Em runs it. I'm sort of in it, as an artist and a partner, but Em is the instigator and the brains and the sort of let's do this, But the result is that stuff looks really beautiful. In a way that I haven't experienced with my time with major labels or my time with indie labels.
Robyn just really loves the color green as well. So it wasn't until we were in a relationship that I had to say, look, mate, can you stop putting out these effing green records?
Well, I'd only done 5, 5 green LPs, but they do get a bit confusing after a while, yeah.
I'd go to sell them in the dark at clubs, and I couldn't see them. I couldn't read the fonts, and they all looked the same.
Yeah.
And it's like, in a way, it's like, okay, yes, it's a strong aesthetic. I'm glad that you're committed to it, but I try to, yeah. So you're getting back to your initial question, Mike. You are right. There were those 2 sort of pandemic era releases were very collage aesthetic. I don't know if we'll stick with that for our upcoming things, but yeah, that was definitely a vibe that I was into at the time.
Was Blonde on the Tracks the first release that kind of took the label to a new place?
Yeah. It was the first one that we had done as a full length vinyl, and because it was the pandemic, there were some things very much working in my favor, namely that because we weren't on tour and I also wasn't leaving the house and didn't have much to do, it was comparatively easy compared to normal times, whatever that means now, but to just be at home and get stuff done. I could type up the nice little manifesto letter that went with the record and say, thanks for buying this album, and then I would mail it up and ship it out. And, you
signed them all, didn't you?
And I signed them all, and we were working with a pressing plant that sadly no longer exists, but our friend Frode had a pressing plant in Norway. So when I first went to put out the record, I wrote to him and said, can you press this? And he said, yeah, I think I've got enough orange vinyl that we could do 300. And I said, oh, that sounds great. And we just left it at that. And it was very, and that sort of dictated how the album came out. And then people liked it. So I wound up pressing more, but it was very much like, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was just learning on the job.
Well, like the inclusion of I Contain Multitudes on that is such a sick choice because Rough and Rowdy Way, there's such a there's a renewed interest in Dylan's like new work and all that stuff. And it's such a cool, it's become like a definitive take of that in a lot of ways for a lot of people.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so wild that even happened because Robyn and I are the only people in Nashville who don't have a studio in their house.
Yeah.
In terms of engineering skills, I would say we're deeply incompetent. Would you agree?
Oh, profoundly and proudly incompetent. We actually bought a 4.5 track Zoom machine, and we had a couple of mics. But I couldn't figure out how to operate more than one channel at a time. So we did about 23 takes of I Contain Multitudes and finally got it right. And then Em sent it to Pat Sansone, who overdubbed it. But we got the essential thing, around the table, the kitchen table. And as Em said, we had time because it was lockdown. So there were lots of skilled people. And we were able to email tracks off to people who could then overdub them and mix them and do all sorts of adult things with them. We could at least generate things, and you'd already done most of that record had already been recorded.
Yeah,
in a studio.
So six of the 8 tracks were recorded in Nashville on Dickerson Pike in a studio run by John Little, who he's a lovely man. He doesn't have that studio anymore, but 6 of the 8 tracks were done there, and Pat then finessed them at his home studio, sort of between Wilco tours. And it just sat in my Dropbox for ages. And then because there was time in the pandemic, and then, as you say, Dylan released I Contain Multitudes, and we're both deep Dylan fans. I mean, Robyn and I don't always see eye to eye musically.
We're not that far off.
We're curious what that.
Where do you guys differ?
Yeah.
We're like two eyes separated by a nose. Me being the senior dude, I cleave more to 60s Dylan, and Em has got much more of a soft spot for the Joker Man era.
I do too.
Of that.
For sure.
But with the Multitudes, that the Rough and Rowdy Ways came out, and within a week you decided to record it. I mean, it was really quick. The record was barely there. Our version was done like 2 weeks after. It was quick.
Yeah, it was that rare moment in doing a Dylan song where I had the opportunity to cover it before anybody else did. It felt a bit like a race.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm a very slow person, but I do work well under pressure. And I just thought, yeah, this is great. Let's do it. But we both speak Bob Dylan. Robyn is very fluent in Pink Floyd and Captain Beefheart and stuff like that, where I lean more towards Neil Young and Joni Mitchell in sort of, there's stuff we share.
But they were all on reprise, and there's a lot of, we kind of meet in Laurel Canyon, don't we?
We do. We meet in Laurel Canyon.
Definitely. We're wandering up and down in our funky denims. Sadly, neither of us drives, but, our avatar selves are just sort of coasting on two open-top scranch-mobiles, and with sort of David and Neil in the spare seats or whatever. Yeah,
David Crosby.
Crosby and Neil Young.
Not David Geffen.
Not David Geffen. And no.
Neil Cassidy.
Well, now there's a thought. Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of thing, that speed is sort of what doing things on your own allows you to do that you can't necessarily do if you're working with this big group of people who have all these steps that have to be done until like a release. So did you feel like because you were doing it yourself that you had more control over getting it out in the time that you wanted?
I did did feel that, and because I also withheld the album from streaming services for a while, that's pretty unusual.
Yes.
And certainly I don't know anybody on a label who is allowed to do that.
Talk about that, because that was a cool thing that you did, actually, I thought.
Yeah, it was many pros, many cons. So the pros were that I recouped the record really fast, and also because it was a Dylan covers project, I had a lot of interest from people who just like Bob Dylan, who'd never heard of me before. So it was easier than if I was just doing my own material. I think that's a much tougher slog to get people to buy an album of songs they've never heard before that they can't stream. You know, I'll readily admit that because Dylan had paved the way, I was able to just go, thank you very much, and I'm going to do it like this.
Yeah.
So I did. I did it like that. And the cons were that if you don't participate in streaming, you know, that the very, very aggressive, you know, streaming's here to stay, but the aggressively pro streaming people say it's a discovery tool, and so I guess the negative aspect of it is that I will never know that had I done the things that they say in the industry are best practice, like running a pre-save campaign and getting people to save your singles, I will never know if that record would have been very well playlisted had I used the immense interest from strangers to drive them to Spotify. And I mean, to be honest, I don't really care, but you sort of wonder, you know.
Is that the kind of attitude that you just kind of have to have when you're doing it yourself? Just say, this is how I'm going to do it. This is the best I can do right now. This is all I have, and I won't think too hard on the what ifs.
Yeah, you can't think about the what ifs. Do you ever think about the what ifs, Robyn?
That would be awful, because it would just be like being on a plateau with no fence anywhere, and you could fall over the cliff in any direction. You know, there's be so many ways to get lost. I think it's much easier to assume that everything's inevitable, and you're just fine tuning it. Really, God no.
And I mean, you can't please everyone, let alone yourself. Like you just got to do what feels right, and then and then hope for the best, I think.
Would you recommend that whole process to other artists, like the whole doing it every single thing yourself?
Yes and no.
It depends on what your gifts are. You know, it particularly suits you, because you have a number. You tick a number of those boxes. You are entrepreneurial. You've got initiative. You like dealing with people mostly.
I do. I like
You're
people.
also, although you're not an actively visual artist, you've got a very good eye. So you know what works and what doesn't. You've got a very good ear, so you know what sounds good or not. So you're a good assessor.
Listeners, I'm not paying him to
And
say
no.
Like, this is so tender.
But you know, but all this is true, and you know, there's lots of ways that Emma and I, there's lots of friction between us, and we're still quite capable of having screaming matches. But it actually, in terms of the reason Tiny Ghost works is because you're doing it. I wouldn't be doing it with you as a solo old artist cult figure type. I wouldn't be doing it on my own, nor would I necessarily know anyone else that it would suit. In other words, ideally, yes, we should all be running our own record labels, because otherwise, basically, if you're on an indie label, you're buying your product off the record label in order to sell it at very little markup at gigs. You're expected to be your label's best customer. And I honestly don't know how people survive like that. I'm very lucky to be with Em, because so much of her skill set works in terms of running a boutique label.
I mean,
But, you have to be the right person.
very important that we have to shout out now to Gina Bacon, who is an amazing Nashville radio host and music enthusiast who also helps work at Tiny Ghost. Like it's not a completely solo effort, she helps me ship out a lot of stuff.
That's good to have some help. And I find that those relationships also push one on to keep going.
And to sort of to the second half of the answer of that question is that the negative stuff is that it does take time out of my ability to do other things. And sometimes, a comparison is the enemy of contentment. I don't like to do it, but I see more prolific artists that have a better support infrastructure than I do. They have management or a label or booking agent. Like I have none of those things. I do everything DIY. They're just more prolific as people. They're able to get out more stuff. and I just can't. Like, I haven't put out a record since Blonde on the Tracks, but I've put out an old Soft Boys album, an instrumental Robyn Hitchcock record, and Robyn's 1967 album. So I've put out 3 things.
And Shufflemania.
And Shufflemania.
They've all been to do with me,
So 4 things. And so my project will come in next year, but like I can't work at a pace that looks like the pace of some other folks, and I have to accept that. Like the artist me is slower.
No, I wanted to ask about that too, because, albums seem to have very little lasting power or staying power because there's so much stuff getting, like we're inundated with new albums, new songs. Like there's like 2 million songs going on Spotify every month, which is crazy to think about. Most of those will never get above like 30 streams or something, which is sad. But like, so when you're doing it for yourself and you're putting out music to yourself and you're selling it directly to the people that like you, does it mean more? Do the releases mean more or the albums mean more?
I still have, and I think Robyn would be similar to me in that I still have a very old school plan in my brain about releasing music. I've put out singles before, but I generally think that for what I do, they're a waste of time, and they're easily ignored and totally forgettable. They've never worked for me as a thing. An album project that has been nurtured and loved into life and had a little bit longer time to gestate always seems to work for me. I don't know what...
You mean 45s? Singles, or you mean just releasing a single digitally?
I don't really have time to explain how people single drop on digital stuff to you right now.
Oh, so that's from the future. I don't know anything about it, mate. No, after my time. Sorry, yeah. No.
But Robyn's is still the same. We tend to think of things in big project. In doing things in a big
like an
way.
Album release.
In an album release.
For sure.
I'm still kind of in the 90s in my head. I can't help it. It's not that bad a thing because it's coming back around.
No, for sure. It is totally. I mean, like when you were on the wall of Grimies, that was awesome. Like driving by that, it was super cool.
Thanks.
But like the whole vinyl resurgence is also good for being in the record label business. You know what I mean? Because that's the product that you're selling.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I get so, young music listeners buying Taylor Swift vinyl blows my mind. Because you know what? When I was their age, God, I sound ancient. When I was their age.
I hope my wife is listening to this because she's a Swiftie, unfortunately. And she bought fucking 4 of the same 1989 with the different little covers where she's in a different pose.
She's in there.
That's exactly what
That's what they want you to do.
That's what they're banking on happening, because it is.
Yeah.
But when I was the age of the young Swifties getting into buying vinyl didn't even really exist anymore because the record industry was shutting it out in favor of CDs. So all the vinyl that I bought was from the 70s, and that's how I got so into 70s music, because I was picking up David Bowie and Neil Young and Linda Ronstadt in thrift store bins.
Yeah.
Well, that's because, you came of age in that particular, the CD wasteland, whereas when I came into it all, it was, vinyl a go-go. It was all about albums. When I first started listening to music, it was about singles, the top 20, the 45, and plus people like me couldn't afford to buy an LP. But, by the end of the 60s, when it all got serious and everyone was on reprise, that's when life, you measured. By the time I was 15, 16, I was measuring my life out in LPs. And what I thought was, I want to be a musician. I want to make albums. I want to make LPs. I didn't think I want to get in the top 20, with a little 45. I thought, I want to make LPs. It didn't occur to me I had to sell them. It didn't occur to me that maybe Captain Beefheart didn't get much in the way of royalties or whatever, and the Magic Band was actually funded by his mum or whatever,
and Sid Barrett went mad.
Sid Barrett went mad and wound up living with his mother or whatever, But I just thought, they're okay, they've made LPs. All I ever wanted to do was make LPs. It got going, and then they metamorphosed into compact discs, and, while I was on major labels in the 80s and 90s, and I watched all that dwindle away, and then it miraculously came back. Sorry, that's just my context, but the end result is that Em and I both very much merge when it comes to how we want to see our music out there,
And my listening habits too are pretty album based. I sort of don't even notice singles coming around. I'll just wait for the album because I want to hear it in full. Yeah. I've always been one of those weirdos that doesn't, because I don't lean very pop in my listening. Often the track that I like most on an album is going to be, the 13-minute Gillian Welch I Dream a Highway that's never going to be the radio single.
Right.
So that's the kind of listener I am. So I like a full length, and I like it when people have the chance to stretch themselves out.
Definitely, and you get a better picture of the context and what they're going for. I'm a vinyl nerd too.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're into that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a validation that still comes with artists holding their own vinyl. I still see that. I've worked in a record store for years. I ran a DIY label myself, and I work now in a more like artist label services capacity. But I still see that magic of holding your own vinyl still is happening every day. I love that.
Oh, I think the beauty of tactile things in an increasingly digital world shouldn't be underestimated. I think that's really important. I think as people become more and more aware how addictive these devices are and how much they are they tie us to like work and news cycles and like being like trained pets where it dings and we go, ooh, what's happening, man? And it's like some spam text saying.
But also when we interviewed Steve Albini, he said like all these platforms could just decide to shut down, or someone could buy it and all of your stuff could be gone.
Exactly.
And if it's not in a physical form, it doesn't exist anymore. Well,
nothing's permanent. There are no tablets of stone. But what I've always felt is that if something was on on vinyl, an LP or whatever, it would be possible for a space anthropologist to arrive in 10,000 years' time open the correct pyramid, find a record collection in there, and then figure out by looking at the grooves that actually all you had to do was put a pin or the alien futuristic equivalent of a pin into the grooves of this black or whatever color the disc is, spin it round, and the message would come out that a smart enough anything that's smart enough to arrive from another planet would actually probably look at an LP or a 45 and figure out that actually that was a sonic message encoded in it. Of course, they might spin it backwards. So, it would be completely different from how we heard it, but they'd still hear the noise. So I think there's, in this age where there is everything is logged, but nothing is permanent. In a way, LPs, vinyl, is the closest we have to stone tablets now. So, it's vanity to think that your stuff is gonna last very far into the future. But I still love the idea that, yes, it is there. Like you said, here I am and here's my LP.
Environmentalists, I think, would feel differently than we feel about the permanence of the vinyl. But
I guess they would, but but there's all kinds of figures on the environmental impact of digital footprints, which is like a really sad and boring combo for another time.
No, there's tons of different sides to all of that, and I love that recycled vinyl. Anyway, I think you should build a pyramid, is what I mean to say, and put your records in it
for sure.
But do put on the
East Nashville is really lacking in pyramids.
The one in Memphis is a Bass Pro Shop.
Maybe they have a basement we could borrow for record storage.
It's what you need with a pyramid is a basement. The quality pyramids have all got basements. They've got little elevators that go down into them.
Is it like an iceberg where that's really most of the body is underneath? That's where all the
you
good
just want a
stuff
floating ice pyramid. I mean, that's not a big ask.
Oh, cool.
So, what's next for you guys? What's next for the label?
So we've got quite a few projects on the go at the moment. I have a new record coming out in 2025. Sort of, I think it'll get announced in February, and then I will probably put it out around May or June. I haven't decided yet. That's basically because there's so many logistics that I still need to work out. We've got some Soft Boys reissues that we're lovingly remastering that will come out. It's the 45th anniversary of Underwater Moonlight next year, which is a classic record. And my goal for that album is I love the way that for certain classic rock bands, like big classic rock, you can go into any record store in the world now and be like, I would like a copy of Fleetwood Mac Rumours. and my goal for Tiny Ghost is anybody could walk into any record store in the world and say, I would like a beautifully remastered issue of the Soft Boys Underwater Moonlight. And it would be available to them.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do that with a lot of Robyn's back catalogue. I mean, we're currently trying to wrestle back some of Robyn's albums from A&M.
Wow.
But you've got more info
the major
on that.
label stuff, which is harder because in theory you sign an eternally binding contract. But, money achieves everything but immortality, which makes money grind its teeth with ever-increasing despair in its own particular chamber. But, we're trying to do that. And, the idea of Underwater Moonlight, it's kind of like, okay, what are the big albums? Fleetwood Mac Rumours, Underwater Moonlight, the Soft Boys, Me and Stevie Nicks, wow. But you've always been fond of Stevie.
I'm fond of you both.
I like to think I'm your Stevie.
I hope that doesn't make me your Lindsay.
Oh, there's no Lindsay Buckingham in our relationship.
I'll be your Don Henley. How does that sound?
Hang on. Would that make me the other bloke? The one nobody likes? I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
It's no. It'll be great if we get those out.
And then Robyn will have another record. We're going to do a record together.
Wow.
And But one of the negative things about running a label and doing it all yourself is, one, you cover all the overheads all the time. There's no one there to kind of loan you the money and say, hey, here's the money going to the studio. And two, there's no one there cracking the whip saying, get this shit done. So it sort of, which is great, but also if we go on tour, that just means that like stuff, there's no one there working a 9 to 5 going, come on.
Right.
Come on.
But there is the financial imperative that in
To
order
feed the
to
cats.
keep, to feed the cat, but also just to keep going. You know, once you've started it, you have to come up with more stuff.
Yeah.
Just to pay for it. You know, so actually, it does have it does kind of goad you into producing, into getting the stuff out. You know, once you've got so far.
I'd love to get the label to a point where we were able to put out other artists too, but I'm also mindful of the fact that if I do that and I put my energy into that, that's going to affect my own ability to do art. So I'd like to get some of my projects sort of a little bit more closer to being finished and out the door before I did something like that. There's lots of cool bands in Nashville that I really, really love, and lots of cool artists who I think really deserve a bit of label support. And I don't want to be a hoarder of knowledge either, you know. I think I would rather share all the information and tell anybody how to put out their own work or help other people put out their own work rather than have them go, oh, it's all too overwhelming. I can't do it.
But they have to be gifted that way. That's the thing. You know, we know lots of people who are on small independent labels who would not as small as Tiny Ghost, but and it would be great if they could be their own Tiny Ghost. But it's not that easy.
But it's not for everyone. Just in the same way that like being a recording engineer and a producer is not for me or Robyn. We would both. I can do all the label stuff, but I would so rather sit in a room with a pro who knows what all the knobs mean and like cares about gear, because I don't know shit. Like I'm really not very bright when it comes to that stuff. You know, you got to play to your strengths.
We can't be good at every single thing. That wouldn't be fair.
You got to play to your strengths.
Absolutely. But we've got quite a few of them. You've got a lot of them.
Stop. Why are you praising me so much?
Why am I praising you? Well, I don't often get the chance to.
It's sounding so dodgy and sinister.
Well, I am. That's because I'm British, so it does. As soon as I start to sound positive, it does sound creepy and not to be trusted. But that's that. But I think it's just the reflection of it. Really thinking about it. I'm just going through one of those phases, you know, maybe it's to do with the current political climate or the current time of year where you actually have to look around for the positives and go, well, you know, what is great? You know, my God, the Cats. Wow, a fantastic boot heat record label run by my wife. Whoa, you know, there are certain things that I just go, well, this is fantastic.
Yeah, we both feel enormously grateful to be able to do what we do and to have the listeners that we do have who are so great and so dedicated and buy the merch and buy the vinyl and show up and come to gigs. And then also to be in Nashville, which just has such a fantastic community of like-minded people who really care about music and art and culture. And it's really unusual to be in a city where so many people love that kind of stuff. It's pretty special.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, last question. So are you guys optimistic about music, making music, putting it out?
very optimistic about music because I think until AI completely replaces us, and when it does, it's going to make its own music too, you know.
Well, they made a better album. Like there was an AI Oasis album, and it was way better than anything Oasis ever made.
Well, there you are. But if nothing else, if our only legacy is AI and a bunch of pyramids with old LPs in it, you know, oh my God, Seals and Crofts, you know, well, hey, send out a beam to Alpha Centauri. You know, even if our legacy is entirely mechanical, and actually we've come up with something so much better than us that we will be discarded as an intermediary stage, music's going to be part of it. You know, we have now, it's there. It may not even be made by humans, but it's going to carry on. While there are humans, they're going to need music. Whatever form it had. Music was there long before the music industry. And as you were talking about art and patron, you know, at the beginning, that sure, the money has to come from somewhere to make a living out of it. But there was a time when people just made music not for money. It just happened, you know. I think music will always continue. Whether that works as a financial thing is a whole other matter, but, you know.
And we've talked about that a little bit, where sort of a measure of success in the music industry is just, can you keep doing it? And that in itself is an achievement. Absolutely.
And I think that there is no shame either in taking time away from it if you need to take time away from it. I mean, that little spark of love of music that we all have, you know, you get it when you're a kid and then it never goes away, and it sort of pushes you into this sort of, okay, I guess now I'm working in music. You wake up one day and you're like, oh, shit, this is what I've done with my life. I mean,
yes, I've done what I wanted. Oh my God. Oh, wow. Why didn't somebody stop me?
Mom, I wanted something else.
Mom, I assumed I was going to be an insurance agent. Whoa, what the hell am I, a musician? Yeah.
But so long as you can honor that, I think that's, you know, that's a measure of success too. You know, I think it's really one of the regretful things about our time and data is metrics they're designed to make people feel inadequate and unsuccessful. And I think that you can you have to redefine what success means for you all the time, I think, to stay happy. I
have a bumper sticker that says music is not valued on how many times it's played. And I thought that was a beautiful and interesting sentiment that feels similar to that.
Oh, I mean, there's no musician out there that, like, you couldn't tell. I mean, for me personally, because everything I do musically, I've got this sad timbre in my voice. It's not gonna. I'm not gonna reinvent myself as like a peppy, fun, happy, go-lucky, good time gal singer. It's not possible. Like I taught myself to sing listening to Linda Ronstadt and Dusty Springfield, you know, so I've got mournful tone. So, but for me, one of the things is that, like, people will come up to me at shows and they're moved. Mm-hmm. They cry. It makes people feel something. And that is so much, one person coming up and saying that meant something to me is more meaningful than this sold this many units, or this had so many streams, or this post on which soon-to-be defunct social network got so many likes.
Right, it's true.
I mean, all that stuff's important, but it's not the real emotional core.
You know, I mean, the bulk of Robyn's fans are people who listened to his music when they were teenagers.
And, like me.
Yeah,
for sure.
And they come up at shows and they say, you know, thank you for playing that song. I heard it on the radio when I was 16. Or
some of them are older than me. It's incredible.
Many of them are older than me.
No, I'm the senior dude. But no, I mean, you because music at its best keeps you company, which is why people develop these extraordinary one-way relationships with artists. They think, well, if I know Arthur Lee or John Lennon so well, they must know me, or Bob Dylan. But actually, sadly, it's not. The reverse isn't true. But you do feel you've got that connection, which is why we do it. Really, I mean, we have to make a living out of it, but you do assume.
If there wasn't that connection, though, you would stop doing it. I think because there are less challenging ways to make a living.
Yeah.
I mean, regretfully, the only other day job that I learned to do was being a journalist, which is also a sort of struggling industry now.
Yeah, I did that for a long time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you doing?
No, I'm out of it. I'm in marketing now, so yeah.
You're set.
Yeah, I could buy my wife 4 Taylor Swift albums.
She deserves them.
She does, believe me.
Tell us about your shirts, please. Do you find they are an extension of your brand and your self-expression? I mean, you're kind of known around, I guess,
The world.
And definitely, it's great to see you coming in Nashville, because I'm like, yes, this man is coming with a good shirt. I know it.
Raising the game.
My shirts. Mm-hmm. Well, they cover, my torso, I suppose, covers about nearly 2/5 of the landmass of my body. So as I'm not what they call ripped, I can't wander around with a naked torso. I need to cover it. And besides, it's often quite cold. So I hit upon the device of wearing shirts actually when I was a teenager. And my mother, bless her, had a good eye for natty threads. She used to buy me these Liberty shirts with sort of paisley patterns on. And I carried on with that. So I grew up wearing brightly coloured shirts with strong patterns. And being on stage, also, it's quite good if you have shirts that have a strong pattern. It's not, it doesn't look kind of muddy.
When I first started dating Robyn, I was living in Nashville, but then I got a job in Australia doing a radio show, and it was a sort of bucket list job for me. It was hosting an Americana alt country show on a national broadcaster. So I had to leave Nashville, and I had some sadness about that, but I was thrilled to be back in town and doing this show. And Robyn would come and visit me in Australia, and there was a guy who made shirts, Russell Wade, and Robyn had 3 polka dot shirts made in exactly the same size polka dot, but different colours. So they're black and green.
It's genius.
And
Blue.
one is blue.
Yeah, with little white dots.
And there's about 4 other black and white polka dot shirts. I do a lot of the really daft and dull admin for Robyn's social media, and I've had people comment, why is he always wearing the same shirt? And in my head, I'm like,
they say that?
No, but the dots are a different size.
I've got quite a few polka dot shirts.
You also, I saw you at Hardly Strictly, and you had a polka dot guitar as well that matched your shirt, which was insane.
The tubby caster.
When was that? This last year?
I think this was the year that Lindsey Buckingham played, actually, to Full Circle.
Mm-hmm. Wherever
it was
kids dropped in.
It was before the pandemic.
Oh, wow. I know somebody else lent me a... Oh, no, I had a I've had polka dot guitars. Yeah, they come and go. I do have them. Yeah.
There's a
crazy.
few in circulation. And it's for my personal taste, it's a little too much. Like a polka dot shirt with a polka dot guitar.
I loved it.
I love it personally. I'm very into fashion.
It's kind of meant to be seamless,
Yeah.
It's part of you. The guitar is an extension of you.
You can camouflage in a polka dot universe.
So is the shirt. Yeah.
I'm saying it now.
It's important to be visible until the time comes when actually you need to be invisible. But I very seldom reach that stage. So anyway, I like colours and patterns, and
Yeah.
I'm a sworn enemy of beige. And also I hate it when people, as they get older, they prepare for eternity by just blanking themselves out, And again, God, I'm in a positive mood today. Bigging up my mother. My mother, bless her, continued to wear extremely extremely flamboyant scarves and all sorts of stuff when she could barely walk, or at least she didn't know where she was going.
You don't know where you're going either most of the time.
No, but at least I know that I don't know. I can say that in a George Harrison voice. At least I know where I'm not going. Wow. But it's fun.
Yeah, do not go quietly into that great beige.
Yeah.
It's horrible, beige. You don't want to go there. I mean, we're very unbeige people, Em and I. We just try and keep it vivid.
That's a good title.
And it's just, you're not here for... Well, maybe you are here forever, but it all the more reason just to keep flaming, in whatever way you can.
I love it. Thank you for taking the time to answer that.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for coming on.
Right. I feel like that's a great place to...
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks for listening to Devalued. For more information about our podcast, please visit devalued.show.